So I saw this image on the SC subreddit today of the Avenger Cockpit view comparison, and it brings up an issue that I've been wanting to discuss for a while, and that's user interface or UI problems that we have in Star Citizen and simple fixes that can be made to vastly increase their usability. Obviously, they're not done with the HUDs yet and this kind of stuff, but I think we're actually going backwards in many ways, and I'll explain that. To kick it off, what you have here on top is a concept artist mock-up of the Avenger Cockpit view. I'm not sure from when, what date it was created. On the bottom, you have the reality. Now, I actually rented an Avenger just to show, what it really looks like now in 2.6. And that reality is actually somewhat worse than that image they shown. The first thing you might notice is that the field of view is much smaller, and how much you can see in the frame is much limited. And that's because the field of view is actually locked. Before, you could actually put different values in a config file and change your field of view a little bit and to see more in the frame. I don't know why CIG removed that feature, but they have in 2.6. So if you really want to actually see the displays, you have to unlock your head views and look down. Now these displays are called MFTs. So after you pan down right away, that should be kind of a red flag, right? That you have to unlock your view from where you're normally looking at just to see this information. It's not immediately accessible. Are your weapons overheating? Are they out of power? What's your current shield status? How many missiles do you have? You can't answer any of those questions when you're flying around normally, right? That's a problem. Now, even if we could see the ship status display, what do they even tell us? The shield, for example, is represented by this tiny, thin green line. If it's depleted or taking hits, you have virtually no way of knowing that without, kind of intensely looking at this and trying to figure that out. Then there's the weapons display here. It's obviously ridiculously tiny. That's the first problem. Like, try to read that. You know what I'm saying? With the font choices that they made, it's impossible when your head is where it is. It's like a joke. And then you have charge, which is represented by a number, digital. And then you have heat, which is a gauge, essentially, or in some ships it's a bar. It's a pretty standard rule in UI design to not mix, right? You either go with all digital or all gauges generally. These MFDs, these are the things that CIG has been working on. Whenever we know that it's not done, right? But what are they doing right now? This is where their efforts are going, adding these bespoke displays to every ship, like the Hornet, the Gladius, etc. And it's not that they aren't done. It's that even when they are, when they will be finished, if they keep following the design principles and the patterns that they've been showing us and the progress that they have made so far, we're not going to be in a good place. A place where pilots have the information readily accessible and in front of them in the heat of a dogfight. You don't have time to have to study display or to notice these little tiny changes. You need the information that's important to being able to survive or kill your target in the right place, in the right way. And looking at older concepts and older UIs, even ones that they actually had in the game, that's why I say we've gotten noticeably worse. You also probably noticed the horrendous glare issues right now. You're going to get glare in space when you have bright objects like suns and planets and moons and stuff. That's going to happen. That's not the issue. The problem is how the HUD handles it. For over 2.5 years now, CIG has had us playing on this map, on Broken Moon, with this bright blue light and these light green HUD elements. And this is one of the biggest snubs, or the most disrespect, I should say, even, that CIG has displayed to its community and the players that actually take the time to test. It's it's unusable, it's frustrating to deal with, and we've been doing it for so long now, and yet they haven't touched it, or like it was such a relatively easy thing to fix, have ignored it, and it's so upsetting that I don't even want to get into it right now. So let's go on to some of the other head elements. Okay, so while we're famished when it comes to things like ship status and weapons, we're kind of drowning when it comes to certain other indicators. Um, right around the center axis of the ship, we have the gun sight, we have the TVI, we have the view cursor, lines to the pips, and then, of course, multiple pips. We have this rather large bounding box around the target. Um, and then we have what we actually want to see as the target itself. All in this critical area, which is right in front of our ship, center line, where we're focused, where we're trying to fly, where we're trying to hit targets. This is actually even relatively high visibility because the aurora at this angle actually has some surface area that you can see. But if a ship is coming at you and you're trying to use lag pips, there's so much clutter in the way that it's virtually unusable, and that's a big I think problem. We've been picking on the Avenger because of that screenshot, but let's look at some MFD setups in other ships. Again, this has been where the focus of the UI team has been, or it must have been, because we're certainly not seeing progress on UI elements elsewhere in the game. So we'll start off with the Gladius here. In this case, we only have 3 MFDs visible without painting our head. Our own ship's display, which is pretty much the same as the Avenger, the 2D radar, and the enemy ship's display. Look at the Saber, we have much more visible by default in terms of MFDs, and we have a 3D radar on this ship. But you'll notice that the elements are extremely small. We have the same problem with the radar one where we can't even see it. So even though we have more, and it's nice that we can finally see the shield, there's still no missile indicators or anything like that, and much of it is cut off. Finally, we can look at the F7C, which is the Hornet variant that actually has had its MFDs implemented. They've made a little bit better use of the area that they had by putting some of these up on top, and they're readily available, or readily visible, I should say. Again, we have a shield display for our own ship, even though the ship itself has fallen off, and then we have the target one, which is cut off right down the middle. Part of the problem here with MFD visibility might be with the design of the ships themselves. This is actually a large problem with SC ships, and that's where the pilot is positioned in the ship. So let's look at some of the profile views here. First, we have the Saber. I am sitting in the ship right now. That is the top of my head. We can look at the Gladius, and yeah, I mean, the head is visible, but here's the top of the ship, right? And here's my line of sight. Let's compare that really quick to modern day aircraft, modern day, combat aircraft. The F-16 has a bubble canopy. The pilot is almost touching the top of it. And we'll look at the F-22, be a little patriotic. Again, very high. You're right. We're not at all struggling to see his head inside of the ship, like we are with this guy. I mean, visibility in an aircraft is extremely important, and the engineers who built these, amazing dogfighters that have been, in this case, the F-16 has been around for a long time and adopted by many other countries. And the F-22, which is considered to be the best dogfighter right now, actually, let's not get into any debates about that. But they recognize that fact, right? That you have to have the pilot has to have the ability to see what's around him. And what we have right now is pilots that need booster seats, and it's not really going to be effective way to fly when you turn your head and you see a bar and you can't see over the front of your nose. That's a big problem. I could also talk about the problems with the radar globe, and some people prefer 2D versus 3D. The whole radar thing is a debate for another time, and I would instead refer you to some of the player-made concepts of how to improve the radar globe, like this one from Canato, and I'll just skip right by that issue. So let's look at, we've been expecting HUD improvements since things started to break. I think it was 2.5 when they took out the CVI, whatever. Let's look at some of the earlier versions of the HUD. So this is going back to 0.8 in the Hornet. I believe at the time it was the F7A. So there's not a lot of useful information on the MFDs at that time. You can see that they've made big improvements in that area. The globe arguably was better back then, and we could actually see, all the faces of our ship's shields and the target a little bit better. Go on to 0.9 again in the Hornet. Not a lot of improvements. The radar did change a little bit. You can actually see the target that you have selected at the time. This is, you can tell it's 0.9 because this is when the pips first came into play. This is the Avenger, which we talked about a bunch before. This is in 1.0 when it first came out. Again, the UI in this picture, although we don't have the MFDs at all, seems a little bit cleaner. It seems like there's more useful information to me right where I need it to be. And then we'll go on to 2.0 about this time last year, where this guy is bitching about me ejecting from a disabled ship. And you can see that, where we were before the CVIs kind of went away, at least in the Super Hornet. Again, we have all the weapon information right here where we need it, ship status, that kind of stuff. One thing you're seeing in common here is the love of these large kind of 3D elements. Even this little bounding box around the target, which largely obstructs it when it's far away anyway. And we've gotten away from that a little bit when we had 2D MFDs, but the actual HUD, this stuff mounted on your helmet screen, it's still going to be a thing. Now in this case, we're having important info, but it's taking up so much room, right? Too much room. Every good MMO out there has a party system, for example, to group with friends. Where's that going to go in this screen, right? This is where you would have your pin targets in this version of the game. There's no room. What about place for tracking objectives or tracking waypoints? Comms and interaction with NPCs. Like how are you gonna hail a ship or see them respond or issue orders to your wingman? There's no room for any of this, even when they do have the CVI or the HUD, I should say. We're going to be constantly using these things, and we need a place for them to go. Now let's talk about the solution to this. And it's kind of obvious to me anyway that the people that know the best about SC dogfighting, or being a turret gunner, or being a captain of a multi-crew ship or whatever, will be the players that have actually put in thousands of hours into doing those jobs. They know what data they need and how they need to display it. And so the solution is to let those players create their own interfaces. The most successful MMO in the history of MMOs has been WoW, and it's been years since I've played WoW, but it has an entire ecosystem around player-created UI, and it has been by far the best user interface experience in any game that I've ever had. Because of that, it's because the players can. This picture kind of displays it, even though it's a nasty mess. That's what this guy wanted to have. He wanted his information displayed this way. You can have a minimalist UI that's just as effective. It's a matter of style and what you need to see. This is like it's pretty versus very, very functional. But there's so much data here, and the ability to interact with and display data how you want is the key, right? In some cases, he wants an analog display and a digital one at the same time, but you can choose to have only bars or have only numbers, but this guy has what he wants to have. And the simple fact is there's not going to be enough UI devs in CIG to ever produce what the community can. right now when they feature MVPs or whatever in the Star Citizen community, there are people that have carved a ship out of wood or painted a plastic model. Let's give the SC community something useful to actually produce, and they would, in droves, right, create better UI elements. Imagine what they could do with Moby-Glass apps alone. Let us do it. It would be insane and put Star Citizen up at the level of these games that give player control to the players. Anyway, I think I've been going on a little bit long once again, as I have a tendency to do for something that's supposed to be quick and in quotes. Definitely, I tend to ramble a little bit. So I wanted to cover one thing really quick though. I've been ragging on the UI team this whole video, but I wanted to point out the greatest UI thing I've seen so far in Star Citizen, and that's the ship customization interface. So we have in on the hangar and in the landing pads the ability to use the augmented reality to modify ship components and switch them out. We also now have this list where you can select components and some components within them. And then we also have the ability to interact straight out of the 3D model. So that's kind of highlighting how choice and options make things better for players, because we can do we can interact with it the way that we want to. So just imagine what players can do if they were able to customize the UI and the HUD and the MFDs and things like that. A couple of quick notes here though. The weapons tend to, or the internal components tend to kind of disappear behind each other a little bit. And when you make changes right now, it doesn't actually show up in any kind of sense, like what you've done, how you increase the damage, how you increase the heat generation, that kind of stuff. Obviously, I think they're getting to that. In the meantime, I would recommend going over to StarCitizenDB.com if you want to know, what the actual stats are for a Badger or an Omni or anything like that. So I will stop talking for now, and I'll see you guys next time.